Let's go back to the concept of manning up. Man up is not the opposite of man down. Man down, of course, implies that someone, usually a man, not always, but usually a man, has been injured, and the concept goes well with the expression we need more men, which usually applies to a context where people are likely to die or they're in a dangerous situation, which is not usually counterbalanced by the idea of needing women in dangerous scenarios in the spirit of gender diversity. You could claim that this woman has more balls than you and she's got bigger balls than you. Well, unless you are talking about the modern definition of a woman who might happen to have bigger testicles than you, we are saying that this woman has manned up more than you have. She has a spine, she has a backbone, where you don't. But you are meant to, and that's important. Like, we do not assert that a man ever has bigger metaphorical ovaries than a woman in the spirit of something positive. So, as I've said, to man up is to not be like a woman or a child. A woman can man up, but a man or woman cannot woman up because woman up implies nothing. To be like a child is to not be like an adult. Act your age as an appeal is never an appeal for someone to act like they are five if they are five, any more than an appeal to act like an adult as a request is counterbalanced by requesting someone to act like a child or to stop acting like an adult. If an adult or adults are suffering, you cannot lay it at the feet of children and blame children, because children either have no agency or responsibility, or they have less agency or responsibility than adults, and adults are not meant to be dependent on children in that way. Now, if children are suffering, it can't not be the fault of adults in some way, because adults have either full agency, or at least more agency than a child, agency being a prerequisite for responsibility. And so if children, yours, or societies are suffering, it means that you or adults as a collective have failed them. The same arc here between children and adults also applies to men and women. If you say our children, talking about children in society, and you don't have children, it means that you, as an adult in society, are meant to look out for children. Men will also say this for women when we say our women, but if you're a feminist, you might say, well, that's possessive. You don't own women, where it's not about being possessive. It's about the notion that if something goes wrong or if women are suffering, then you can lay it at the feet of men. But women tend now, not in the past, but now, to not say our men. Where if women did actually say our men, what's happening with our men, it implies a level of responsibility and ownership that means you're meant to look after it. Men have agency by default, whether they like it or not. If you add racial or sexual gender orientation modifiers to men, then not necessarily. Where you might have been guilty for the crimes of your ancestors in one context, in another you might not be guilty of what you did yesterday, today, or tomorrow. Both children and women, to a certain degree, have agency stripped from them, and can also strip agency from them when it suits. And we will strip agency from them when it suits. If you imply that they have it in a context where they don't want it, then you're being cruel or you're victim blaming, because someone is always meant to hold the bag of agency and accountability at all times. If someone makes an appeal for you or men to act like gentlemen, it's not counterbalanced, really, by the claim that someone should act like a lady anymore. Like an appeal to act like a lady, whatever the fuck that means. It's a sexist demand to restrict behavior. If you make an appeal for men to behave like gentlemen, well, it's outdated, it's archaic, but it's not sexist, because asking men to restrict their behavior is something that men are just meant to do. Men in this dynamic are preeminent or potential oppressors, and women are preeminent or potential victims. That's why appeals to gender diversity are never appeals for more men. The arc in this, in the spirit of diversity, this works with racial and cultural diversity, but I can get to that later. A business staffed entirely by women can't be framed as suffering from a toxic lack of men, because that would imply that you could hypothetically have a toxic quantity of women. A business staffed entirely by men that does well is hurting women, because it's men making lots of money and not women who could take their place. A majority male environment can be framed as toxically masculine, but toxically feminine as a concept is not an idea that is promoted as a fair counterbalance. The excess of either masculinity or femininity could be toxic, but the excess of something that is pegged to a preeminent victim group can't be framed as equal to or worse than something that is pegged to an oppressor group. Like, well, if women are the preeminent victims of men, then intrinsically male qualities can be framed as negative, but the reverse isn't true, because that would be victim blaming.